Okay, so nice to meet everyone. Thanks for coming out tonight. My name's Annette Dvorak. I'll introduce myself briefly in a second. So I was asked to talk about negotiation skills and communication styles for internal, communications with other teams. Sorry for the very boring title here. I promise it's not going to be boring. If you think about negotiations, a really, really broad topic. I think I spent more time staring at a blank page trying to figure out how do I narrow this down to something that's even remotely interesting and something tangible. So my goal really is that you can learn something to take home today and start practicing tomorrow. People study negotiations for their entire lives. They get doctorates in it. So I'm no expert in that. I have a lot of experience in that sense. But my goal here is really just try to simplify it for you to allow you to take something. So just quickly about myself. Annette Dvorak is still this really pretty slide from Shinyi. I'm the Senior Director of Account Management at Riskified. I've been here for 5.5 years, and I've been promoted up from an account manager I first initially joined. I'm American. I grew up outside of Philadelphia, but I also, fun fact, I'm Israeli because I have an Israeli passport and made Aliyah, I think like 8 years ago, which is the top photo there where I'm holding my 2 dogs, nice and happy. And my whole career so far has been in client management. So I've been customer facing for a decade now, and I hope things I've heard I've been passed on to all of you. And a few other things, I love backpacking and hiking. I like to structure my time off around hiking trips. So the center photo there is an awesome trip in Corsica, about 200 kilometers. I hear about people on the road about distance and sense for you. And baby animals, because who doesn't love baby animals? And learn that to have a baby Gemma out of it. So again, I'll talk through just the themes of how I divided the talk up for today. But first, we'll just start with an anecdote. So I'm 32. When I was 22, the story is, I was living in Israel. I had my fresh marketing degree at hand from University of Maryland. And I was working at my first job, which was a really small B2B digital marketing agency. And Kshir, he was my first boss, my first Israeli boss, was somebody who I worked very closely with. And this was meant to be a very short gig. I was thinking maybe 6 months, 8 months, then moved out to the States, get my career going in New York City. Things went well. And it actually went very well for me. So the job was a huge success. I was managing our biggest clients. I was visiting customers like Amdocs and Nice Systems, which are big customers in Israel, leading meetings. I even carved out a whole role for resale and kind of tacked that onto my position. Gave myself a fancy title, and then it was time to ask for a raise. And, I made all my bullet points. I talked to myself in the mirror about why I deserve this raise. So I go into the office, request a meeting, sit down in this big glass office next to here, and I say, I want to talk about a raise today. And then I cried. So glad. We cried. Not like so all, hyperventilating crying, but there's definitely a little wetness in my eyes. My throat got really tight, shaking, all nervous. I think I got through it because I continued to work there for so many years. That was my first experience in that scenario. So jumping forward to right now, what I'll go through today is 3 main. So first, negotiating a daily life. So just starting to create awareness of negotiating and how you can start to really practice it in a little bit of a more fun scenario than that first conversation you're having with your manager. Basic skills for business negotiating. So I've been lucky at Riskified to really have a big focus on negotiations since it is such a big part of my team's role. So I'll share some skills that I've taken and I think are, in my terms, simple enough that you can take home and actually start practicing tomorrow. And then finally, communication styles that I find to work well when talking with others. So just quickly first, I sent out a survey to women in Riskified. Before this, just to get a sense of how people were feeling. So on a scale of, I'd rather ride the New York City subway on a 100-degree day to I practice negotiating in my free time, how does negotiating make you feel? We can see the results here when 50% of people lean towards rather ride the subway on a day like today, which, you feel like me, it's the worst. 50% leaning towards sweaty left. And then separately, no matter how it makes you feel, I wanted to get a sense of confidence around negotiating. So I also said, how confident are you with negotiating? The green little sliver is the hell yes, and the blue and the purples here are I think so, or no, I'm not the worst, clearly a little bit unsure. So let's just quickly show of hands here who would go hell yeah in their confidence with negotiating. All right. So jumping in the first section, this is a quote by me. Practice makes you not perfect, but better than you would be without practicing. So the whole point here is you don't need to be perfect. I think negotiating can sound very scary because it sounds very mysterious. What I've learned is like, you just need to learn a couple things and you can just really hone in on those and perfect maybe one or two things that are going to make you that much better. Has anybody heard of Chris Voss? Anyone? All right. So if you Google negotiating, you'll probably come across this guy's name. He's awesome. Highly recommend looking into his content, but he is the master negotiator. He used to work for the FBI and he would negotiate hostage scenarios. So I'd say unless you're trying to negotiate hostage scenarios under an armed scenario, you don't need to be perfect. He probably does. So again, we're just striving for the confidence and the comfortability. So in the survey, I also just asked people to share a little bit more about where they're seeing negotiating, both in work and life. You can see here just a few quotes that I grabbed from that. So negotiating rent with your management company, negotiating your car leases. So these are everyday activities where you can take these skills from today and just start practicing, because the worst that can happen is really nothing at all. So this is something fun that I actually tried this morning. I will admit it didn't work, but I'm still here sleeping today, so it doesn't stop me. It shouldn't really change anything. But I think it's fun. It's called the 10% off, or the nice person discount, I've also heard it called. So again, just going after and trying to get comfortable with this idea of being uncomfortable. It's negotiating, it's not comfortable. It can be very awkward. It's not always going to go great. So I encourage you, go to your coffee shops, and when you're paying for your coffee, say, can I get 10% off today? They're going to look at you funny. Maybe they'll be like, okay, because they don't care. Maybe they'll be like, sorry, I can't do that. The person behind you might look at you funny, but it's New York City, it doesn't matter anyway. I'd asked for it this morning for a $6.50 cold brew that I got in Williamsburg, and they said no. So I would be finding a new coffee spot. So again, it's not being perfect. It's really just being aware of where negotiation comes up for you in daily life. And I think that's a fun place to go out and start practicing. Great. That's theme one. So my second theme here is negotiating in business. So depending on your roles or the type of industries you're in, it's going to look probably a little bit different for each of you. I know my team's role is very focused on contracts and negotiating renewals and terms, fees, what the customer's going to be paying us, things like that. In all of the, experience and workshops and practice that I've had, these are three skills, simple enough skills, as I call them, that I think are incredibly effective, and they're very, very easy to do. You can just take one of them, practice it a few times, and you'll see hopefully what I saw, how immediately effective they are. So with the first one, empathy, I think this is kind of like the ground rule to negotiating. What is empathy? The ability to understand and share the feelings of the other person. I've heard the word sonder, which I really like. It's kind of that awareness that every passerby is going through their whole life. Like, we all have things going on, we're all human. If we can just walk into a negotiation understanding that, you're already at a level playing field with them. They're already going to naturally want to engage with you and probably want to help you out a little bit more. So what does this look like in practice? I think the example I hear the most is like the service companies, like your phone provider, airline companies. We shared a personal anecdote a couple years ago when I was first at Riskified and really diving into negotiating. I was like, I'm going to give this empathy thing a try. And I remember I was in the office upstairs in the conference room on the phone, I think with United Airlines, I'm not sure, but I was like, I'm going to try this. So I called them. I had to change a flight. It's going to be a $200 change fee. I really didn't expect to have that fee. I'm sure you get this question all the time. Like, you must have a million customers on hold. I know this really sucks, but is there anything you can do about this? She's like, no, it's the standard. It's just the cost to change a flight. I was like, really, this is really ruining my day. I was really not expecting this. I know this is really annoying for you, but is there anything you can do? She went 1 second, puts it on hold, comes back and says, all right, you know what? So up to my manager, one time we can waive your fee. Real story. So that was my first experience of taking these practices and just putting it into real life and seeing that it actually can work. And on the other hand, the worst case, she was that I'm really sorry, but I can't. It's worth a try. Second skill here is mirroring. So this one's my favorite because it's the most simple one to do. You literally just repeat what the other person said. So this is great to buy a little bit of time. I think in negotiations for business that are more strategic, or ability to kind of like hear the other person and what they're saying and think about our next move, maybe, you pretty much literally just repeat what that person said. So as an example of what this can look like, if you're putting an offer on the table and you're saying it's going to cost $100 and they say, oh, that's way too much. We just say, way too much. You're literally just repeating them. It doesn't take any skills at all. And that's going to make them respond to you and just say, yeah, I spoke to a competitor and they offered half the price of that. Or, yeah, I already have my budget approved. I can go back and revise it. And already you're getting information that you didn't have before. And otherwise, the other way you can go about that is, oh, it's too much. It's like, oh, okay, well, maybe what does work for you, or maybe I can go back to my manager and check on fee. So this is going to buy you time and give you more information. And I promise it's like the easiest one that you can possibly do. And finally, silence. This was also fun. So I remember my previous jobs, the best advice I ever got from a coworker was just shut up. There was a job where I was on the phone a lot doing product demos and running through a long list of customers constantly. And he was just like, when in doubt, just shut up. And it remains true to this day. And I often think of my colleague Johnny who'd read this advice. There's a quote up here that says, only someone who's embodied their value, sit afterwards and let it be. So I think with silence, the whole idea is just to say what you want to say and then stop. It's hard for people like me who ramble and tend to just fill in that silence, but it's human instinct to fill in the silence. And what ends up happening is you start negotiating with yourself in your head. And, as soon as there's silence, everybody wants to probably jump in and fill that out. So you really just get comfortable with the silence. I think I had one scenario where, I got very good at this on calls, and I think I had one scenario where the other person's very good at it too, and maybe I actually had to be like, okay, so do you have any thoughts? But that's one in a million times, and I swear this is a very, very good practice. It actually reminds me, just today, I was talking to Rob, who is a designer at Riskified. He was tweaking some things in the presentation, and he told me a story how this weekend he had a contractor come to his house to chop down a tree. And they said, it's going to cost you $1,000. And Rob just kind of froze up. Before he could even get his words out, because he was in shock of this price, they said, I think we can do it for $800. And then he was still about to think about it for a second. And they said, you know what? We can do $750. This literally happened to him this weekend. And he saved $250 just because he was quiet. So again, letting it be and just being comfortable with the values that you're sharing, proves it to work every time. All right, brings me to my third and final theme, just negotiating internally, but not always negotiating, also just communication styles, management or other teams, organizations. When we think about negotiating internally, probably you're thinking about asking for a raise, just very common, here, I think that a lot of us have for whatever reason. I summarize this also into 3 areas. I don't have fancy slides for each of them, so we'll just look at this for a moment. So bringing data and sharing full numbers, being specific, and bringing ideas. The bottom line here, too, is what I have at the top there. Remember, who you're talking to might not be the decision makers. And I remember when I had this realization, moving into a management role where I had people asking me for reasons, I was just like, oh, it's not my money. Oh, shit, honestly, if I had the money, I'd give it to you. And I want to get out one more money. Who doesn't want more money? But it's not my decision, unfortunately. There is a very structured process in place to allocate money to employees. So I have to go back to my manager, who has to go to her manager, who has to go to HR at finance to actually vouch why this person deserves this raise. So that brings me to bringing data. We're often making numbers. I just have a nice example from someone on my team earlier this year. So at the end of the year, we do performance reviews, and teams had an opportunity to share about themselves, what they think they did well, what they want to work on. And I had someone on my team, they're a very, very, top performer, came to me with a list of 7 different accounts, and they were managing not even all of those at the time. They were managed to us. And there was 13 different data points attached to those 7 accounts, explaining exactly how they added value. And it was sometimes intangible things like nurtured this relationship past the time I managed it, which fostered a future upsell on a very difficult, stuck situation as they reached back out to that good that they should show. So I think too, often as women, you don't really think about those more intangible things. You feel weird, writing them down on a list, I did this, I did that. But really, that's what you need to show. No one has a good memory unless I'm writing something down. I'm not going to remember it. So I need the team to tell me, what they did well, what they think they deserve it for, and then I can take that back to turbine. Being specific, I think, overlaps a lot with bringing data. I think in this, it's often an area I have a hard time diagnosing with my team. It's like, I don't know what's wrong here, but like something's off. And oftentimes it's around specificity. So being specific is, thinking about what you're actually asking for. I was in a meeting, again, I think the anecdotes just kind of help color the picture, but I was in a meeting actually with our CEO and someone else on another team, and we were talking about an account, and we deal with fraud management, and we're also talking about the performance of different segments and geos and things like that. And I remember someone said, like, performance needs to be better. And I was like, I agree, like, probably needs to be a little bit better. And our CEO was the one to say, what is better? Like, how am I supposed to go to the head of analytics and say that needs to be better without you telling me what's wrong? And he was like, emphasizes so much that I was like, he's so right. Like, we need to be very specific when we're asking for, and I think this applies to like nearly anything. When you're asking for help, it's like you need to be very specific in what it is that you're asking for. Which brings me to the last thing, which is bringing ideas. So bringing ideas, I think just internally, that's what other people want to hear. I want my team to ask for help. That's what I'm here for. But I don't want to do their jobs for them. So I think coming with ideas, like if you feel stuck, like everyone's job is hard, but you're in your job for a reason and you're trusted to be there. So I think with bringing ideas, it's really just, coming like, I'm feeling stuck, but here's what I'm thinking, or here's what I have so far. Even here's what happened last, and here's where I I'm thinking this, but that's really where it's going to foster, your ability to improve and like hone in on what, could maybe be better or really just be emphasized and tweaked with the help of somebody else. So, it's not going with something empty, just waving that flag as I need help, but, bringing something to the table, whether that's to your manager or to other teams and are asking for, resources or projects or ideas for customers or doors, whatever the situation might be. All right. Summarize. Get comfortable to get confident. So again, just thinking about the daily scenarios that you can start to practice things and just have fun with it. I think once you see things working, it becomes a lot more enjoyable and you get a lot more comfortable. So when you go to those more serious business situations, you already have that confidence. For more, business scenarios, empathy, mirroring, and silence are 3 simple enough tactics that I promise you can just start doing in any calls that you have, and you'll see how well they're working. Bring data, bring ideas, be specific. I think that applies pretty much across the board, even in personal relationships as well. And lastly, I didn't mention this, but make a feel-good box. So when I was working through this presentation, as I mentioned, if I don't write things down, it's hard to remember. I was doing a lot of searching in my Gmail and things like that. So anytime you get good feedback, anytime you get a positive response to something that you worked on, if you had a successful negotiation, even with your, cable provider, write it down and put it in one place. And then you can go back to it anytime you remember those situations. It's also very helpful for scenarios like person on my team who had this nice, organized, very specific list of the things that they accomplished. So I think, it's an excellent way to just put it all in one place and then take it forward with you for the future. And just lastly, before questions, a little bit of a short list of resources of just some things I mentioned here today, but I think they're all super awesome. And then while we take questions, these are just some of the other responses I got in the survey, both for business and outside of business negotiations. Fun to read. Thank you.